Iranians in the Middle East and here in the U.S. are experiencing a range of emotions this morning after the U.S. and Israel's military operation against Iran. Last night, cheers were heard from large crowds of Iranians in several cities following the confirmed death of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. And here in the U.S., Iranian Americans took to the streets in cities like Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. to celebrate the blow to the Iranian Islamic regime. While there were celebrations taking shape, there were also scenes of mourning from the leader's fiercely loyal base. Thousands of pro-government supporters gathered in Tehran to memorialize Khamenei. Through the split screen of emotions, questions remain on what power base will emerge now that the man who ruled Iran with an iron fist for nearly 4 decades is gone. Joining us now, former CIA Director John Brennan. He's also an MS Now Senior National Security and Intelligence Analyst, and Arash Azizi, contributing writer at The Atlantic. Thank you both for joining us. Director Brennan, I want to start with you because the Supreme Leader, according to reports, according to the President, according to Israel, according to Iran, is dead. There's going to be some kind of leadership vacuum. They will get together and there will be another leader. But the regime itself is deeply embedded within the everyday lives of the people who are in Iran, whether that's the IRGC, the police, the military, just allies throughout the civilian infrastructure. When you look at how this president, this administration has struck the regime change with, at this point, all we know is just one leader, what does that tell you about what the next steps are going to look like? Because it creates a vacuum, but most importantly, the regime is so deeply embedded, the ideas aren't going anywhere, it seems.
Yes, Gene. This regime has been in place for over 45 years. And as you point out, it's deeply embedded in the life of Iran society, as well as the economy. The IRGC is so closely tied to all of the economic centers of power in Iran. There have been a number of leaders that have been killed, the head of the IRGC, the head of intelligence, and others, along with Khamenei. So I think the folks in Iran are still trying to figure out what's going to happen. As you pointed out, Khamenei was reviled by many Iranians, both inside Iran and outside, but he also was revered. He was the religious leader of the Shia faithful in Iran. What I'm waiting to see is whether or not there's going to be any fracturing of regime support within the military and security services. In fact, yesterday I was wondering whether or not the U.S. had coordinated somehow with maybe a senior general in the Iranian military who would have announced a split from the regime or some unit in some province or whatever, because you really need to have some forces under arms who are going to be the sort of gravitational pull within the country in terms of support for the opposition. But so far, I haven't seen that. Maybe somebody in some units or components of the military security services will announce that they are separating themselves from the regime. That, I think, would be a real good indicator that things are starting to shift away from it. But at this point, I think the regime still has a stranglehold on the instruments of power inside of Iran. And as much as the Trump administration, might want the Iranian people to take over, it's a long, long road that we have ahead of us. This is just the opening chapter of many chapters in terms of the impact and implications of U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iran.
And on that point, Mr. Azizi, I was struck by, President Trump's message to the Iranian people yesterday, basically paraphrasing, this is your opportunity to take over your government, to take back your government. And I'm just wondering, will the Iranian people take the president up on that call? Do they have the wherewithal to take back the government?
I mean, it's not, it's hard to predict sort of mass spontaneous uprisings, but it's a very tall order. I mean, for people to rise up and seize the government, it's for people to rise up and protest, to declare that they don't like the government is one thing, but to replace it, to seize power, to organize an alternative to it, this is only possible if you have a political leadership, if you have organized networks, if you basically have an alternative that is ready to take charge. But unfortunately, we don't have that alternative. And people like myself have said for a long time that, unfortunately, we don't have that alternative. So this kind of wishful thinking that somehow if you hit the regime, a new power will emerge spontaneously from the people has always been on pretty shaky grounds, unfortunately. I wish we had done the preparatory work as Iranian democratic movements to be able to seize an opportunity like that, but we basically haven't, unfortunately.
Director Brenner, Brennan, I think all of us have a lot of questions about Trump's varied and checkered justifications for this war, but the New York Times puts it very elegantly and clearly. Officials with access to U.S. intelligence told the Times this week that Mr. Trump exaggerated the immediacy of the threat posed to the U.S. by Iran's missiles program. The suggestion that Iran was trying to build a nuclear bomb was also unsupported. According to a 2025 report from the Defense Intelligence Agency, Iran did not have intercontinental ballistic missiles that could reach the United States. There's also little evidence that Iran is trying to build a bomb. Do you believe that Trump has lied to the American people so far?
Well, I certainly believe that he hasn't told the truth. As you point out, there was no evidence of any type of imminent Iranian threat, either to the United States or even to Israel. Yes, the regime has engaged in a lot of nefarious activities over the years, but these negotiations on the nuclear front were going on, and I think that they were getting closer to maybe having some type of arrangement or deal. But to me, I think it was quite clear that the Trump administration, working very closely with the Netanyahu government, has been marching toward this attack for quite some time. And I don't think they were seriously considering having some type of nuclear deal. So I think what they're doing right now is maybe making up stuff. I hear that they had supposed intelligence about Iranian plans to carry out attacks even before these strikes. I don't believe that the Iranians had any intention to do that. As I think is widely acknowledged, the Iranian government is at its weakest point in terms of its capabilities. Its proxies have been defanged largely over the last year and a half or so. The Iranians themselves, they're facing really difficult economic times. Their military has not been able to basically repair itself. The nuclear program itself, according to the Trump administration, was hit hard, if not obliterated, last year. So again, I think the Trump administration was determined to carry out these strikes. It's very similar to what I think was happening back in the Bush administration. I think there were some members of the Bush team that were determined to attack Iraq, irrespective of the intelligence. And I think the same thing was true here. The Trump administration was determined to carry out these strikes against Iran, again, in concert with Israel.
Mr. Azizi, we are out of time, but I'm curious if you can help me understand something, because I feel like when we cover regime change, for one, is folks either the people are happy or they're not, right? The folks that are impacted by this. But what I think is we can hold lots of things in our heads, and more importantly, the people of Iran and Iranian Americans and Iranians around the world can hold multiple things in their head. They can be very happy that the supreme leader, this man who led with an iron fist for so long, is gone. But they can also be worried and concerned about what the next steps are and what the plans are for their country, and concerned about who's next.
To be honest with you, all my life, like millions of Iranians, I had dreamed of seeing the end of this man, not just as a sort of petty thing, but this is the man who ruled Iran since I was 1 year old, in 1989, and someone who I really do believe his demise is positive, it's going to, it's going to lead to good changes. But despite all of that, I didn't really join the celebrations yesterday that many of my compatriots had. I mean, in my heart, as I had complicated feelings, precisely because of these fears. We're in the midst of a terrible war. And I think ultimately Khamenei not being there will be positive for the next sort of developments. I think Iranian democracy movements will need to find their feet again. But I'm certainly very worried. There are many worst case scenarios, possibility of civil war, a state collapse. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, one has to be honest, a lot of people have a more simplistic view of things, and don't look at very worrying possibilities that also do exist.
Arash Azizi and John Brennan, thank you both so much for coming on this morning.